the Dark Lord has risen, and everything is different now.
It's great to have some source material to work from if you're creating a character.
He's in danger of allowing his pride to topple him.
Learned that he's a wizard, but he doesn't really know how to control his powers yet.
You sought peace. I gave it to you. This is hardly a gift. What have you done to me?
What have you done to me?
I am the one keeping the storm at bay.
Was it exciting for a question for the both of you? Was it kind of exciting to explore a different genre within the same series? Like there's this thriller aspect and it's very psychological with this series.
Yeah, it was really fun to kind of, and it makes a lot of sense. The Dark Lord has risen, and everything is different now. Everything is more urgent and frightening than it was.
Thrown into chaos.
Yeah.
And I think, Galadriel has no time to kind of recover from the... she'd probably have a little holiday after what she's just been through, but there's no time for that because of the urgency of Sauron's return, and we have to get it together as quickly as possible. Adar's work is kind of done at the end of the end of the first season. He's created Mordor and he has a home for the orcs, and that's kind of it until Sauron comes back, and then it's, we've got to do something about this existential threat.
Back at it again.
Yeah.
Galadriel was deceived by Sauron at the end of Series 1. How is this kind of impacting her going to Series 2? And what can we expect from her journey?
Well, I think she's pretty broken. She put her trust in someone and she was completely... she was deceived. And she's lost a sense of self through that. And so she's kind of desperate to make things right, but also feeling kind of so fragile and broken. And so it was really fascinating to play her, because I think she started her journey in season 1 as someone full of certainty and full of conviction, and he's taken that from her.
And a question for both of you. Both of your characters have the same enemy. Can we expect an alliance from the both of you? As the series progresses?
We're looking at the options and seeing what we can do to counteract the threat of Sauron. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but we're not the best of friends.
No.
So it's a very it's a careful dance we have to do to work out if we can trust each other or not. Yeah.
Sauron's identities are revealed. How does this impact his journey going forward in Series 2?
I think he now has to adjust and find a new way of achieving his goal, and that is to go to this person he met at the end of the first season, Celebrimbor, and try and get him to help him make some rings. And the rings are this manifestation of this idea that he has the power not of the flesh but over flesh, and that is to heal Middle-earth. So his focus has turned from Galadriel to Celebrimbor now.
Yeah. Is it quite interesting to explore the different sides of the Rings of Power? There's almost a new genre of this movie, it's psychological thriller, especially with the scenes we've seen between the both of you.
Yeah. Well, it becomes torturous. It becomes very intense. Yeah. Because these two minds that meet to create this apparently common goal, one of apparently a beneficial goal, initially at least, become very, they work together very intensely, and they become snappy with each other. They argue, and it gradually gets more and more intense and fiery.
There's a lot of room for the relationship to kind of breathe, is the word I keep using, but it has.
It's true.
It has. There's a lot of ups and downs.
And it's just such an exciting challenge as actors to they're playing the same characters, of different versions, but then just the way it develops throughout the series.
Yeah, it's incredibly. It's a gift, particularly to be in a show of this scale, and yet still have the room as actors to do something that's like a kitchen sink drama. If you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that it's
totally.
like it's very. It's a period piece, but it did feel quite naturalistic and dramatic in the whatever one sense of the word.
Yeah. It's been very
Especially for like Daniel, for your character, what's the future have in store for the stranger now he's begun his journey with Nori?
Yeah, so I think as you'll have seen, the season sort of picks up end of season 1 with quite a positive vibe. They're heading off, they're hoping that things are going to be plain sailing, and they're going to find out the stranger's purpose, and maybe Nori will find out something of her purpose in this wider world. But very quickly things start to go wrong, whether that's the landscape working against them, food and water, heat, or whether it's the impending darkness that is gradually closing around all of Middle-earth. Suddenly they get to a place where they're forced to make decisions to solve problems that I think are way outside, certainly the stranger's scope. Thankfully, a character comes in the shape of Tom Bombadil, who may well be able to help, but unfortunately, he also is so complex and ahead of the stranger that far from actually making anything clearer, it sort of feels like the waters get even muddier. So I think the stranger's job is going to be to try and navigate all these different choices that he's got and work out what it is that he inside needs to, the path that he needs to follow.
And then for Tom was such a beloved character from the books, but he's never been on screen before. So did you approach something like that?
Well, obviously, it's great to have some source material to work from if you're creating a character. Quite often, you're having to use your own imagination right from a blank page. So actually, for some guidance to be given to you, and I was tried to put as much to one side the idea of how beloved he was and how excited people might be for this first representation of him on screen, and just try to focus on how I connected to him and what he meant to me, that from the character that I could see from the books and from what JD and Patrick were creating as well. And obviously there was a look to try and to achieve, and people were incredibly precise about making sure that that was achieved in the right way. But then once you get on set and you see the house that has been created for him, and then you were able to start playing like you would on any set in terms of the relationships that you're building with the other actors, and also the ideas that you can have from being on set and wanting to bring him to life a bit.
Yeah. You mentioned like what the character meant for you. What did you hone in on specifically about Tom?
Well, I guess he's so. I guess the enigmatic nature of him and how he seems to be so. That sense of having seen everything. And so whilst being aware of how important this interaction with the stranger has the potential to be, he is also aware that should he choose a different path than the one he believes is the right one, that we will go back to the beginning. And I guess that sense of not taking things, or not being stressed by too much, or not taking things too seriously, and that we all return back to dust. And
sorry, and I also think for me that it seemed like he didn't just want to make everything easy. Like, the straight.
Every character that he comes into contact with has to find it for themselves, and they have to find that seed within them of the truth of what their meaning is.
Yeah. What can we expect in terms of like big book moments, and how do you decide like when to deviate from the source material?
Sure. So season 1 was all about bringing audiences back to Middle-earth in this very different era of its history. All of these peoples, all of these races, all of these characters, and then getting the story started. This season we're able to start with a bang. Now that we've sort of set the table, we can play, and we're leading right into one of these major pieces of literature from the lore, which is the story of the creation of the Rings of Power. Sauron's rise, his deception of the elven smiths of Eregion, led by Celebrimbor, the elven Da Vinci. That is kind of the core of this season. It is Middle-earth entering the nuclear age, and how these new powers are going to affect everyone who carries them, every being and nation that's in control of them, and how that's going to change the world at large. So this is a time when we're really feasting on Tolkien, I would say.
And in terms of how to deviate, it's more that we have these big events that we're building to, and those are sort of the flagpoles that are in the ground. And then there's times where you say, okay, what is the most interesting and dramatically satisfying way to get there? And sometimes there's something that would work in a literary form, but if you have multiple hundreds of years passing, it would not really work in a TV form. So you say, okay, let's compress the timeline there and sort of like bring this thing into conversation with this thing, which would be really satisfying in a TV show. So you're sort of bending the lore in order to serve the story in the format that you're telling it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the big moments that might be coming is like the Siege of Eregion. How do you like approach that? Like what was your approach as directors, if it is in this series, of course?
Well, we're working with our directors, which are, Charlotte Branston, our producing director. She did sort of a more intimate battle episode, season 1, episode 6, and episode 7, working with her cinematographer, Alex Dizanoff, and Vic Armstrong, who is a legend in the history of British filmmaking and action filmmaking in particular. We spent a year in pre-production designing that battle. There's an enormous amount of prosthetics work. It's an army of orcs. And the difference between an army of orcs and an army of men when it comes to production is, the world. In some ways you're planning a real war. The logistics required. The Siege of Eregion has not just one battle in a way, but 6 or 7 battles because it's, a horse charge. Then it's a hand-to-hand fight in the mud. Then it's a troll fight. Then it's, hand-to-hand fighting in street fighting, almost like Stalingrad. And each of those phases requires an enormous amount of preparation and logistics, safety concerns, to get the most thrilling thing you possibly can on screen. And it is by far the most ambitious thing we've attempted on this show, which probably puts it high in the running for most ambitious battles in TV, period.
In terms of lore, there's obviously some things in Eregion that we have the rights to, some things that we don't. But one of the core things that I think, is in terms of the character is that Elrond is going to a battle in which he's outnumbered, and in which, he might not necessarily have the resources that he needs in order to be able to pull it off. So watching this character who, we've seen be a politician earlier in the series and in this season, watching him level up and being commander at a battle in which, he's got to fight this massive force that he might not be able to win against is dramatically a really interesting place and fun place to put the character.
Series 1 has such like a jaw-dropping season finale. Like, how will Series 2 compare, and how will fans feel toward at the end?
Well, I think there's a lot of there are a lot of twists and turns in season 2. A lot happens. I think the world building of season 1, which was fantastic, and we have to get to know all of these characters and sort of establish, re-establish the world of it in the Second Age, largely. And season 2, we're like straight into it, and it's kind of like you said, the sort of urgency of having to do something about the return of the Dark Lord just throws everything into chaos, and people have to just take a hold of the reins and just go and just move immediately. Yeah. So there's a lot happens very quickly.
And one thing I was quite interested about, like, as actors, how is it to immerse yourself in a world with such source material like that, as well as rich as the one that Tolkien created? It must be such a joy for actors. Yeah, it's wonderful, and just to have so much to listen to and read, and also so much art that's been created from it as well. So much music. You can. Every time you also have a thought about kind of Middle-earth, you can Google it and someone will have written something incredible about that thought. So it feels wonderful to be part of something that creates so much passion and also so much interesting conversation. And I don't know if there's any other fantasy thing that's kind of as rich as Tolkien's world, since he was working on it right up until he died. It's incredible. Yeah, it's it doesn't really compare. Maybe the Bible, but the actual literature probably doesn't even compare apart from that. Yeah. And the language, I just still can't believe he created numerous languages. It's amazing. Just incredible. And to be able to get the chance to speak them in the show it was one of my favourite things. Especially, bless you. Bless you. Thank you. Sindarin and Quenya especially, black speech, more difficult. But yeah. What's that process like to learn the language? Well, you are only learning specific phrases and lines, but I still remember some of them now. Black speech is more difficult. You remember we had that day of doing... You had to repeat one of my lines in black speech. It was quite tricky. Really hard. We have an amazing voice coach who speaks fluent Elvish, Leith McPherson, and so we're kind of very guided. But it's really difficult because also when you speak, these characters have to be so at home in these languages. Yeah. And I also think you do also get to know your character more by finding out that they have kind of access to these different ways of expressing themselves through different languages. Yeah. Yeah.
And Leith worked on the films as well, didn't she? And so she's got
she's been in Middle-earth
through line of
a long time.
Middle-earth, yeah.
And if Danny, this is probably a question you've been asked by everyone so far, but what can you say about the rumours that your character is Gandalf the Grey?
Well, I mean, what I've loved about the way that people who've watched the show and know Tolkien, that they have used things that are very dear to them to come up with really good explanations about why the stranger might end up being this character or this character, and there are quite a few. There's still quite a few out there, and I think it's always humbling when you hear people who hold the story that dear and have that knowledge about it. And really, I'm just a custodian of a storyline through an entire story, to an entire massive story. But what JD and Patrick have given me is somebody who is blank slate at the beginning, and they're gradually layering up through each scene. We're learning, he's learning more, and we learn more through that. So I think the audience actually know him pretty well already. Whatever his name ends up being, I think if they had to describe him to their friends, if they were going to bring him to a dinner party, they'd have a pretty good inkling as to how to introduce him. And so that's where I'm sticking, really, in the present, and I'll let others take care of the future.
I mean, you've mentioned how you find this fan stories really interesting. Do you both get caught up in Reddit loophole, rabbit holes almost of the odd you kind of stay away from the fan theories?
Because I'm of a certain age, I've sort of missed that. I'm not really massively present on those sort of forums, so I haven't. It's not a massive choice. It's just that my generation, when we came out of university, we didn't even have mobile phones. So it's sort of I'm still sort of catching up onto all these. You on Reddit?
I'm social media-less, so no. I mean, you're aware, just reading the book, you can understand why he, certainly this character, has left such an impression on generations and generations of readers.
Yeah.
So you don't need people necessarily online to tell you that. You're aware.
Cool. And you're playing a very different Sauron now that it's been revealed from Adar. How has this been different from playing Halbrand?
Very different in the sense that I had to adjust some things. I chose to adjust some things in terms of that aligned more with what the vision that I think Tolkien had for the Anatar character. He talked of him being very regal and fair, and it's how you interpret those words, but I wanted to portray someone that has a lot of wisdom and strength, and he's the greatest of elven smiths, and someone that can appear to him and say, listen to me. It would need to be someone that held a lot of gravitas. And so that was, I changed the way I talked and the way I moved, and I wanted the character to have some differences from Halbrand.
Yeah.
And it was a very cool process to go on.
And for Charles, but people of the books, fans of the books will know what's in store for your character, but what would you say, what danger is he in this series?
He's in danger of allowing his pride to topple him, his ambition and his vision for how he likes to see himself. He is a hugely celebrated being, but he wants more. And particularly the little devil on his shoulder is the spectre of the success of his grandfather and what he achieved, and he always wants to just eclipse that. And he's kind of he's been chasing his tail with regard to that, and nothing, I don't think, will ever satisfy him. But that will prove his undoing.
And again, as actors, we've kind of mentioned the rich Tolkien world. Is it kind of, what's it like as actors to immerse yourself in this? There's so much source materials. How does that help you both?
Incredibly helpful. It's one of the gifts of being an actor on this show, because you have such rich source material, and that's one of the bits I enjoy most, is sitting down and reading, or exploring and trying to learn as much about the world as possible. And also to be characters in the canon, it gives you some really specific things to draw on, and you can find inspiration constantly. It just gives you more and more inspiration, and this source material has inspired so many adaptations, and all of those in the respective adaptations influence us, whether it's cartoons or video games or movies, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And the other great thing about it is that this is canon, this story, for example. However, Tolkien didn't fill in every bit of the story. There are gaps that he left for interpretation. So we're being very loyal to it, but adding adding certain flourishes here and there.
Yeah.
And in this season, they're particularly cool flourishes. There's some great things that go on between the two of us.
And one question: what can you say to the rumours that the stranger is Gandalf?
Let's say, keep watching and find out. You know, really, what the season is about for this character is a journey of self-discovery. You know, he's learned that he's a wizard, but he doesn't really know how to control his powers yet. He doesn't know, you know, how he's supposed to use them, or who he's supposed to fight, or why he's here, what his destiny is. So he's going to hook up with Tom Bombadil this season, and Tom Bombadil, we figured, would be an amazing guide for a character like this as he's going on this journey of self-discovery. You know, so really, you're going on the same journey that he is as an audience member. So the who is part of it, but that's not the entire Sunday. That's the cherry on top. But it will be answered this season.
And like, to bring Tom Bombadil into like the Rings of Power, what was that like?
I mean, so much fun. You know, Rory Kinnear is absolutely brilliant. You know, this is a character that's beloved by fans, and you know, challenging to bring into the story because in some ways he's sort of anti-dramatic, and in the books, the narrative kind of like grinds to a halt. When you're hanging out, you just kind of go there to hang out and listen to him tell stories, but when you have a character like the stranger who is on this journey of self-discovery, going to someone that is going to help you understand, you know, the history of Middle Earth and understand yourself and your purpose, you can actually do that. So the two kind of came together really nicely.